everybody, it's Teresa. Welcome to my channel. I'm going to make a necklace today, and I'm going to use some of the products from the most recent Curated bead box. It was called Autumn Leaves. It's the one for September. September's not even here yet, but it will be before we know it. In case you're not familiar, the Curated bead box is a monthly subscription of beads. They also have a findings starter kit in each box. It alternates between silver and gold. It's $20 a month, and that includes shipping. I have a coupon code. It's Teresa35, and I'll put it on the screen here and in the description box below, along with a link to the page to sign up for the subscription if you're interested. The coupon code will save you 35% off your first box, so that would make your first box $13. This is a really good box if you're looking to build up your stash of beads. It's mostly round glass beads. Sometimes they put some type strand of some type of gemstone in there. Sometimes they put in some metal components in there, like this pendant I'm going to use today. There were also some bead caps in this month's box. I'm not going to use those because they were in gold, and I'm using bronze today. Sometimes they have spacers in there, and you get a lot of beads for $20, so it's a really good way to build up your stash. I'm using the 10mm carnelian / citrine duo style glass beads, the 8mm brown gemstone style glass beads, the 50 by 26mm leaf patina metal pendant, and I've got a bail in here and a jump ring to attach to my pendant there. I've got some bead caps from my stash. I've got some findings in here. I've got some 2mm crimp tubes, a couple of wire guardians, a couple of pieces of chain, a piece of extender chain, some jump rings, and a lobster clasp, and a little leaf dangle that I'm going to put off, hang off the end of the extender chain, a little leaf charm. I've got my soft flex beading wire in fine. This is 21 strand, and it's bronze, but you can use whatever bead stringing wire you have. I've got my bead stoppers. I'm going to be using my chain nose pliers, and I seem to always find a need for my tweezer pliers, even if I don't think I'm going to need them. My cutters. And I'm going to be using my bent chain nose pliers, and I'm going to be using both pairs of my crimpers. This is going to be a really simple necklace. There's not anything special about it or anything. I just wanted to do something to show how I do the crimping, because I had a lady comment on one of my videos and tell me that she was having some problems crimping, and I totally relate. I struggle with crimping all the time, and I am by no means an expert in crimping, but I thought I would do this simple little project just to show how I do crimp and go into it in a little more detail than I usually do, and hopefully it would help her. So I'm going to use both of these. I prefer the Xuron ones for crimping. I have an easier time crimping with those, but I'm going to crimp one side with the bead-along ones and the other side with the Xuron ones, just to show the difference. And I know that a lot of people have the bead-along ones, and they're fine. It's just I have an easier time with the Xuron ones. So I think that's everything, and I'll put links to everything in the description box below that I can find links for. So hold on, let me get some of my beads poured out, and I'll be back. Okay, I'm back, and quite obviously I have more than just my beads poured out. I just went ahead and strung up my piece because I decided y'all didn't need to see me string beads. You've seen me do that a lot. I didn't want to take up your time waiting while I strung up beads, but I'll show you what my pattern is here. And I forgot to mention my 11/0 bronze seed beads that I'm using to space out the beads here. I forgot about that when I was doing my supplies. But I've got 5 of the 8mm beads with bead caps around them. There's bead caps around all these, because y'all know I just can't seem to do anything without putting bead caps around everything, and spacers in between. So I've got 5 8mm beads with bead caps around them, and 11/0s between, and then 3 of the 10mm, and then 3 of the 8, and then 3 more of the 10. And then I've got my bail attached to my pendant here with a 6mm jump ring, And under the bail here, I've got 3 little 11-0 seed beads. I usually put something in there so that the bail is not rubbing against the wire. I think it maybe protects it a little. Kind of the same reason why we use wire protectors, to keep the clasp from rubbing against the wire. I always put something in under there if I can to keep that from happening. And then I have just this, I've repeated on the other side, 3 more 10 millimeters, 3 more 8 millimeters, 3 more 10 millimeters, and 5 more 8 millimeters. And as far as my bead stringing wire, I prefer soft flex, and I usually use the fine. I find it easier to crimp with the thinner wire. Of course, I know you would need to use heavier wire if you're using heavier beads, like you might need to use the medium or the heavy instead of the fine. But usually if I'm using heavier beads, I will most likely do wire wrap loops or simple loops with wire instead of using bead stringing wire. So I almost always use the fine. And I almost always, this is 21 strand. I usually use either the 19 or the 21 strand because it's just thinner than the, well, I don't even know if soft flex comes in 7 strand. Of course, I know Beadalon does, but it's easier for me if, like, the thicker wire is harder for me to crimp. I don't know why, it just is. And so that's why I use the fine a lot. And I prefer soft flex. Now, I know Beadalon is a good brand, and I have got some Beadalon 19 strand here, but I have trouble with it, and I don't know why. When I take it off the spool, it curls up on me like that. And I don't know why it does that. I don't know if I just got a bad batch, or if it's more than likely it's something I'm doing wrong. And if y'all know what it is I'm doing wrong, tell me. But it curls like that when I take it off the strand, and I just have a hard time with it, so I don't use it. But like I said, I know Beadalon is a good brand, and I don't know why this roll is doing that, but I just prefer the soft flex. I have a lot easier time with it. So and also I prefer crimp tubes instead of crimp beads. They're easier to crimp because they're just bigger than crimp beads, so they're just easier to crimp. So I'm going to crimp this first side here. I'm going to come in pretty close. I've got my crimp tube on here, and I'm going to put my wire guardian on. And I'm going to take my wire back through the other channel of my wire guardian. And back through my crimp tube. And I'm going to try to hold my wires apart so that they don't get crossed. Because if they get crossed, we want them to each land in their own little individual channel, and if they get crossed, they won't do that. I'm going to try to hold them apart here as best I can, and it is hard because you need about 12 hands to do all this stuff. Now I'm going to do this side with my Beadalon crimping pliers. And I'm going to go into that part there that has the little tooth on each side. And I'm going to lay the little divot. I'm going to go, it's been a while since I've used these, y'all. I forgot how to use them. It's got a little tooth on one side and a little half circle on the other side. That's what I'm going to want to go into there. I'm going to lay my crimp in there. And I'm going to squeeze. And that puts each little wire in its own little individual channel, but it's still loose. See, it's still going to move there, and I don't know why that is. But I'm going to pull it up there. Now I'm going to go into that part on the end that has the little half circles on each side. And I'm going to lay my crimp in there and squeeze and tug Now that's on there good. That's not coming loose. And as far as it being loose before I do that second part, that's probably just something I'm doing wrong. Like I said, I am by no means an expert on crimping, but that's in there good. I'm going to squish it again here just to make sure. But that's not coming loose because I'm tugging hard. That's not coming loose. So I'm going to cut off my extra wire. And I know a lot of people on this first side will put this extra wire back through a few beads. I just don't find it necessary to do that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you want to do that, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I just don't find a need to do that because if it's going to come loose, it's going to come loose when I tug on it like that. I've never had one come loose except for here. I have had a lot of them come loose when I do this first part, when I do the tug test. But if it doesn't come loose here, I've never had one fail after that. So I just don't find a need to put it back through a few beads on this first side. But like I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. If you want to do that, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Now I'm going to come here to this other end and do this part, which is what the lady was talking about. She was having trouble with, and I do too. The second part is much harder to do than the first part. And I'm going to cut it off my spool here. And I know we like to be saving with our wire. We don't want to use any more than we have to because it's not free. But you need to make sure to give yourself plenty of wire to crimp with. Because if you don't, you're going to really struggle trying to crimp with a little short piece of wire on this end. Now I'm going to push everything down here, and I'm going to make sure that there's no gaps in my piece, that all my bead caps are laying the way I want them to, and everything's fine, laying the way it's supposed to. And I'm going to keep it laying in like in a circle like this, because I don't want it to be too tight. And that's what she was saying her problem was, that when she got, or her problem was that when she crimped her second side, it was too loose. And you don't want it to be too tight. You would rather for it to be a little loose than too tight, because if it's too tight, you don't want it to be too tight, or it'll be all bunched up and look weird. But and that's why you don't want to lay it straight when you crimp it, because if you do that, it's most likely going to be too tight and your piece won't flow well, it won't drape well. But if you kind of lay it out in a circle like this, which is the way it's going to be laying on your neck, it kind of helps keep it from being too tight. So I just want to make sure everything's in its place and there's no gaps or anything. And now on this side, I'm going to use my Xuron crimping pliers. I'm going to put my crimp tube on and my wire guardian. I'm going to come back through the other channel of my wire guardian, back through my crimp tube, now on this side I do go through a bead or two, because if I do that, I can get my hands out of the way when I'm trying to crimp. Because if my hands are up here in the way, I mean, everything's already in the way up here. The beads are in the way and everything. So if I can get my hands out of the way, that helps some. And I'm going to pull my wire through. Try to make sure my wires are not crossed in my crimp tube, and I think they are, so I'm going to turn it around here. I'm going to hold on to my wire guardian and pull my wire through. Pull it down until it's down against the beads. But I don't want to pull it too tight, because like I said, if you pull it too tight and you get your piece too tight, it won't drape well. But if you lay it out in a kind of in a circle like this rather than just straight, that helps keep it from being too tight. So I'm going to hold on to my wire down here, which is why I've put it through a bead or two to get my hands out of the way. And I'm going to take my Xuron crimping pliers, and these are just they're just so much easier for me as far as crimping, because when I do this crimping part, I'm going to go on the part here with the tooth, and I'm going to lay the tooth on top of my crimp and I'm going to squeeze. And when I do that, that puts each little wire in its own individual channel. And I don't know if it's because that tooth is so much bigger than the tooth on the bead-along pliers, but it seems to separate the wires farther apart than the bead-along crimpers do. And I don't know, you know, like I said, that tooth is a lot bigger and that divot is a lot bigger, and I don't know if that's why. But when I pull here, that's not coming loose like the other one did. When I pulled on the bead-along pliers before I folded my crimp, that was coming loose, but it's not coming loose here when I tug on it. So now I'm going to go into the little part. There's 3, because these are 4-in-1 crimpers. You can use them with 1, 2, or 3 millimeter crimp tubes. So there's 3 little half circles on each side, and I'm going to go on the one in the middle because that's the one for the 2 millimeter crimp tubes. And I'm going to lay my crimp in there. And I'm going to squeeze. And then I'm going to go up just for a little extra assurance into the part for the 1 millimeter crimp tubes and squeeze again. And now I'm going to tug. And that's good. That's not coming out. So now I'm going to just cut off my extra wire. I want to cut it off as close as I can because we don't want it poking anybody. And there, so my piece is, it's not too loose, but it's not too tight either. And believe me, that does not always work out like that for me. Quite often my crimp fails, or my piece ends up too tight or too loose, which is what she said her problem was with it being too loose. But I don't know. I mean, I hope me doing it slower like that and showing how I do it helps. Like I said, I can't say it enough. I am by no means an expert at crimping, but that's just the things that work for me. So hold on, I'll get my other findings and put them on here, and I'll be back. Okay, I've got my findings here. I've got a couple of pieces of chain. They're about 3.5 inches long each. And I'm going to take I've got some little, I think these are about 5 millimeter jump rings here. Open them up, put my chain on. Put one side of my necklace on here. Close my jump ring back up. Make sure to get it closed really well. Make sure it's meeting there. I'm going to take my other 5 millimeter jump ring and do the same thing on this other side. Make sure to get it closed up really well. Now I'm going to go down here, and I have a 6 millimeter jump ring. Open it up. Put my chain on. Put my lobster clasp on. Close it back up. Now on this side I have an 8 millimeter jump ring. Figure out where the slit is. There it is. I'm going to open it up, put it on this side of my chain, put this is about 1.5 inches of extender chain here. Close it back up. Now I'm going to take, I've got a little 4 millimeter jump ring here. I find it easier to use my tweezer pliers with these little 4 millimeter jump rings because they are so tiny. I'm going to open it up, put my extender chain on here, and my little leaf charm. Close it back up. Make sure to get it closed up well. So there we go. I'm done with my extremely simple necklace. So hold on, let me get some of my mess cleaned up here and I'll be back. Okay, there's my very simple, very easy little necklace made with some of the products of the most recent Curated bead box, the one called Autumn Leaves. I hope it was helpful to that lady that asked about crimping, that was having trouble. I still have trouble with crimping. I don't have nearly as much trouble with crimping, though, since I've been using those Xuron 4-in-1 crimping pliers as I did before. They have been a really big help to me. But like I said, and I don't mean to keep repeating myself over and over, but I am by no means an expert on crimping or anything else for that matter. But I just thought it might be helpful to show how I do it in a little bit more detail and why I use the things I do, like the wire and the crimping pliers and all that. I thought it might be helpful to her and maybe some others, just to show how I do it and why I do the things I do and use the materials that I use. Like I said, I'll leave a link in the description box below to the Curated bead box if you want to check it out, and if you decide you want to subscribe, and that coupon code will save you 35% off your first box if you sign up. I hope you all have enjoyed this video. As always, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate those of you who have subscribed to my channel and watched my videos and liked and commented on my videos. I have a website where I sell my jewelry. It's Teresa's Handmade Jewelry, and I'll put a link to it in the description box below in case you're interested, along with a link to my Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and my email. If you haven't, I'd really love it if you'd subscribe and hit the notification bell so you're notified when I upload a new video. So until next time, hope you all have a great day. Take care.